Hello, and welcome back to the My First Marathon podcast, where we interview runners in all stages of their running careers about their first marathon experiences to prove to you that anyone can run a marathon. My name is Taylor, and today's runner ran her first marathon in 2024 at the Philly Marathon in honor of her dad's life. Movement started for her as a softball player through high school and college, where quite frankly, she was not a fan of running. After finding some joy in walking, she decided to take the jump to running, and after running her first half marathon, she was completely hooked. The passing of her father further fueled her journey as she went through the grieving process while training. This is a really great story episode from someone who's been through a lot of trials and tribulations through her marathon journey, and at the end of the day, she made it out the other side with a new love for running. Without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in. Please welcome Ashley. All right. Well, Ashley, thank you so much for coming on the podcast this weekend. Like we said, we were talking a little bit before. We've known each other for some time on social media, but excited to break down the journey that hasn't been showed online. So thank you so much for coming on. And if you want to kind of introduce yourself and talk about how, you got involved with movement in the first place.
In 2020, I obviously the world shut down and I was like, I'm bored. I have nothing to do. So I saw all these people that were running, there was a big, pandemic wave of people starting to run. And I was like, well,
Sure.
I hate running. So why would I want to start running? I don't know about that. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to just start walking. So I think it was maybe 2 or 3 times a week. I would go around my neighborhood and I would walk an excessive amount of mileage. I would run, or not run. I would walk about 6 or 7 miles. And believe it or not, then I still was anti-running until about 2022-ish. During then, I think it was actually 2021. I apologize. 2021, I was playing softball still at college, but it was really hard to balance studies and softball at the same time. And I was also kind of sad to say, but I was kind of falling out of love with my sport. And I knew that the best way to handle that was stepping away from it entirely, because I didn't want it to be ruined entirely and I can never play softball ever again. So I made the really hard decision fall of my junior year to step away from my college team. And it was then that I was sparked with, I really want to still continue movement because I love exercising. I love doing lifting and stuff. I wasn't a big cardio gal. The only cardio I did was the walking. So
Yeah.
I still want to have a routine of, lifting, strength training, maybe something like that. So it was during that whole year that I started getting back into the rhythm of my own lifting. I was getting stronger. I was, really enjoying having a good work or school to working out kind of balance there, and I could do whatever I wanted. It wasn't like I had something super duper structured, so it was kind of cool to kind of mix it up and do that kind of stuff. So then I remember my college roommate at the time was on the cross country team, and she would always walk in after Saturday, Sunday long run and be like, hey, I just did 9 miles. And I'm like, 9 miles?
Yeah, you're insane.
Yeah, no, that was still in my, I don't like running era, I guess we'll say.
Yeah.
It was with the help of my cousin, who he's really big into movement, specifically lifting, but he also at the time had started running a lot more because he was in the military. So I was like, hey, Glenn, can you make me a fitness plan to run, to get better into running shape? And he's like, okay, so how long do you want to run? I was like, I want to at least run a 5K. That, I think that's doable. I think that, beginner level is something that I could do. So he's like, okay, I'll incorporate strength training. I'll put it all together. So he sent me back a plan, which I actually still have in my files. And sometimes I'll still look at it and I'll be reminiscent, oh my gosh, this reminds me of the old times when I hated running and I wanted to try it.
It was so all new. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but I really like the basis of it, especially now looking back, for somebody that maybe wants to try running. That is such a great program to look at because it's incorporating all the things that probably somebody is already doing, lifting, any type of like cross training, and then it's just little by little adding little chunks of running. I liked it because he kind of already had me mentally set up for what a running schedule would look like. You have like a day where you're doing tempo type runs, and then you're doing a day where you're doing more like speed intervals. And then my
Oh, cool.
weekend, yeah, the weekend he set me up where every week I would add a mile or half a mile. So I was doing like my long runs, which, in the beginning they started out like I was doing 2 miles and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do 2 miles consistently. And then I think I got up to about, I'd say like 5 miles on that, like the long run aspect of that. And I was like so proud of myself. I was like, oh, okay, I think I kind of get where this is going here. Like I like it. So it was right around that time that me and my family had learned about my dad being ill. So I've shared this a lot on my Instagram page, but my dad was diagnosed with frontal temporal lobe dementia.
Mm.
And my dad is a huge part of my life. He was like my coach, my best friend, like everything like that. I don't know if anyone has that like special relationship with like a sibling. He was always the person that gave me so much positivity and encouragement in my sports. And he also knew how much I hated running.
Sure.
So it was kind of like ironic, like, picking this up during something so tragic, considering I did not like it at all. So yeah, it was
Yeah.
around like March of 2022 when we officially saw like kind of the progression of it. He had gotten into an accident and we were all like, my family was all just kind of in this state of shock. Like, how could this happen to somebody? And we didn't even know like this was going on in the background, because there were some signs that were like happening that were kind of leading up to him being sick. But then when he had gotten into the accident, we had taken him to the hospital and they did further testing, and we met with like a neurologist. And later on in July of that same year, we had gotten an official diagnosis that he had frontal temporal lobe dementia. So I'll share like just a little bit about like what that means as like opposed to regular dementia.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my dad, at the time of diagnosis, he was 47 years old, and frontal temporal lobe dementia is a dementia that strikes in a person's life who's under the age of 60. So that's what kind of sets it apart from a regular typical dementia. Most of the typical dementias strike in somebody's life when they're 60 years or older. So this is something that's a little bit more progressive, a little bit more of a rapid decline, and something that strikes in somebody's life a lot sooner.
Yeah.
And there's not much research on it, like as of right now. It's still like kind of a up and coming new diagnosis that people are getting. So we were like completely lost. Like there's not really much, happening what we know about that.
Right. Which is so
So
scary.
yeah. So I guess in that I started just really liking getting out of the house, getting fresh air. And then it was just like, I guess like a culmination of like being frustrated, being in the unknown, being angry almost, and almost like, obviously, like in my own recommendations, I think anyone that goes through this should seek, help or therapy and stuff. But like at
Sure.
the time, something that really helped me was running. Like it was definitely like a safe space for me. So I think that just like all of those emotions and all of that anger and upset, like feeling of, oh my gosh, I feel like, this isn't unfair. This is not real. It almost felt like it went away when I ran. It
Yeah.
was this weird feeling of like just sudden peace. Like I almost felt like, how people say, like, at least in the early 2000s, they said like headphones in, world out.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
A goofy say. That's almost how running felt for me with what was going
Totally.
with my dad.
Totally.
So I guess over time, like I had a few friends in my corner that would run or would encourage me running and stuff. And slowly but surely, I was like, you know what? Let me actually really try to do this. My dad had passed away in December of 2023. And a little bit before then, I was just like, you know what would be really fun? And I I don't know why I don't know, it came upon me like the day before. I was like, you know what I want to start? I want to run every single day. So I started that journey.
Yeah.
I ran every single day for about a year, which I'll kind of get into with my story a little bit. But basically, I started running at least a mile every single day. I kind of like buffered it. So then that way, like there was at least one day of the week that I just only ran 1 mile or did some
Yeah,
sort of
your rest day.
rest day. Yeah.
Yeah.
And honestly, I say in hindsight, I do not recommend it. It's probably the stupidest thing I've ever done because such a high risk of injury, especially once I got to like the back half of 2024 when I was training for my marathon. So I did that every single day. And I guess like just like the momentum of that. And then also just like the grieving process of, losing my dad. I was just like, I was so like almost like empowered to be like, you know what? There's no excuses anymore. If I want to do this, I'm going to go for it.
Yeah.
So I started like running a little bit in January, and I believe it was like mid-January where I started the PDF training from the Boston Marathon website. I was like, I was like, you know what? I think this would be the best thing. I don't think I need to like pay for like an app or something. I just want to test it out, see how I feel. And if I need something more supplemental, I'll go for it and do, some sort of app or hire a coach.
Sure.
So I think that was right around the time when I had something happen that actually led me to find my local run club. So basically, I was running. One of the spots that I really enjoy running is on the boardwalk in Ocean City. So I was running there. I was just like, minding my own business, just running, listening to my good music. And I saw somebody had passed me a couple times, and we did like, the casual runner wave, like the, hey,
Sure. Like,
what's up?
hey.
And, that was like at the time where it's like, I'm like, oh my gosh, they noticed me. I was like, the runner wave worked because sometimes, you know how it goes. Like you do the runner wave to somebody and then they just like pass by and you're like,
Ignore you. Yeah. We're all in our
okay.
own world most of the time.
Yeah, no. And I mean, like, I understand no judgment because I have moments where, like, somebody's probably waved to me and I'm, like, completely zoned in, like, locked in. Um,
Totally.
so basically, we, like, kind of, like, wave to each other. And this happened because the way that the course is, it's like a 2.5 mile stretch and you kind of just run laps, like, back and forth. So I think we might have like waved to each other like 3 times, and it got to the point where like we waved to each other like, wait a second, we should just like run together and just talk. Like I think that would be
Yeah. I
so.
love that.
So it was like me and like this older gentleman. So he like obviously, didn't want to scare me off, and he like approached me. He's like, "Hey, like I noticed that you were running. Like I don't want to like come off creepy, like obviously, but like would you want to run with me?" And I was like, "Sure." Like I was like just, and he's like, I'm so like I don't want you to like if you could say no if you don't want to. Like I promise you like
Yeah.
I mean like well by this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we get to running and he asks about like, my journey of running and like where I'm at. So I told him like exactly what I had told you before. Like, I played softball my whole life, never liked running. Then, found out about my dad and his diagnosis with frontal temporal lobe dementia. And then that's kind of like what propelled me to get into running and get more into like that type of movement. And he told me his story was that he grew up running his whole life. And I thought that was so cool. Like we were two polar opposite people
In the same spot, doing
in
the
the
same
same
thing.
spot, same running. And then he was telling me, he's like, so how far have you been running today? And I was like, oh, I ran like 5 miles already. He's like, how long are you trying to run for? And I was like, I'm hoping to hit like a distance PR today. The longest that I've ran is 7.5 miles. So I kind of want to go for 8 today. He's like, can I join you for the last 3? And I was like, yeah, of course. Like, that's totally fine. So it was crazy because that was the first time I ever like physically ran with somebody.
Yeah.
And honestly, it went by like this. It was crazy. It was so crazy. I was like, wow, I really like running with people. This is so fun. And it was like we were old friends. Like I just met this guy and we finished this run like we were like old pals. It was
Yeah.
sweet. So at the end, he had sent me a link to this local run club by me and said, hey, like if you're ever free or available on the weekends, we do long runs. And there's a bunch of people that are in this group, a lot of like women runners, a lot of like runners that are younger. So if you're comfortable,
Bye.
you're more
Yeah.
than, yeah, stop by. And I was like, okay, I might take you up on that. So that's actually how I found my local run club. And I've met so many amazing people because of that run club, all because I happened to meet Harry that one day. So
I
he's
love
really
that.
cool. He's an inspiration to me and a lot of people in our local run club community.
Totally. How do you feel like joining a run club? I know that kind of changes the experience altogether. Like you said, like it's a whole other thing. So how did that change training for you? Did you adjust anything? Were you just kind of adapting to the long runs that they were way out on the weekends? Like, did it change anything for you as a runner?
So I would say I didn't actually go to like a run club long run until about like the summertime after I
Mm.
ran my first half marathon. But I would say for marathon training, absolute game changer. I felt like I made so many great friends just from, going to those long runs. And I think the one thing that I really love about my run club specifically is that no matter what, you always have like a buddy system. So there's
Yeah,
at
that's
least like
cool.
2 people running together and all paces. So like there's some people that I know who are like absolutely like ripping like 7:30 paces. I'm like, that is totally not me.
Yeah.
So they like, they'll run together and then like I typically like for my long runs, I like typically ran about like a 10, 11 pace. So there was a lot of people that would run that kind of pace. There would be people running like 8, 9. There would be people running like 12, 13. And I love that because like even there would be some days where I'm like, you know what? I kind of like don't even care about pace. I kind of just want to run with these specific people because I want to have a conversation with them. And I want to
Yeah.
like, hear about like their running journey and, what brought them to running. So that's like the most, like, I personally think that's like the most exciting thing about joining a run club is there's so many different people that come together and they enjoy the same thing.
Totally, totally. Yeah. And I can relate to you a little bit on the I think I didn't realize this, but we have a very similar story from softball. I was also a pitcher and I also quit in college. So
Oh
like
my
we have a
God.
lot of parallels there. But I remember finding a running community for the first time and it feeling like a team. Like I was like, I know this feeling.
Yeah.
I like this feeling. Did you feel like that too the first time that you like found your little community?
Yeah. I found that it was like, it was so nice because I also found for my sake, I was, a beginner runner. I knew nothing about all the big things that go into running, fueling, drinking water while you're running, pace, easy days, like what that looks like. So it was really nice because there was a lot of people who were like well seasoned runners who have been running for 10 plus years. There was people of all ages too that personally I love that because there was like people that were almost like a mom or a dad to me and they were like looking
Yeah.
out to me like I was their kid and saying, make sure that you prioritize this, that, and the other in your training. But I really did like the team aspect because it was like, especially with the way that we run, like no one gets left behind. Everyone's there, everyone's encouraging. And, if somebody needs something, like there's so many people there for that person and stuff,
Yeah.
especially like when times get tough in your training.
Yeah, you've got people to depend on. That's awesome. I love it. Okay, cool. I know I derailed this a little bit. So your first half marathon, how was the experience like for you? Obviously, you went through all that training. Everything is so new. Like, that was the first big like finish line that you got to cross. So how did it feel?
So I think I mentioned this before, but I did like a PDF training.
Yeah.
Did like, typical like long runs, like I think beginning was like 6 or 7 miles, and then it like maxed out to like about 10, 11-ish. So I went into that race super duper nervous. I really didn't know what to expect because I don't know if this was something that you had seen. In the past, I only had ran a 5K. I didn't run like a 10K or anything, and that was the only like official race that I've done. Like
Yeah.
I didn't even run in my youth. I was so anti-running in my youth that I didn't even run like, charity 5K. I was like so like,
Sure.
I'm walking it. I'm not going to do it.
Sure.
So I didn't really know what to expect. So I was like very nervous, but I was so excited because I was like, I've trained all this time, and, I just got to get through it mile by mile, step by step. So I made, a killer playlist. That was actually like one of the first couple times that I like actually really started getting into fueling and like really learning how important that is for your body, especially for like a longer run. But I really loved the experience. I I think it's still, yeah, that race is still my half marathon PR as of right now, which is going to be really hard to beat, to be honest.
Cool. Yeah, it's so funny. I talked to so many people, and you were not the first person to say like my first half PR was my best. I don't know why that is. I think I mean, if I had to make a guess, I think we're just so naive to the sport in the beginning. Like we haven't quite thought about all of the things that can kind of throw us off when we're training for a PR. It's just all so raw and like new, and I don't know. There's something to it, but that's
Yeah.
very cool. And then so you proved to yourself that you can do these hard things. So how did the marathon distance start to creep its way into your
As most say, I caught the bug. I caught the
for
run
sure.
bug. I finished that race. I crossed the finish line, and I was like, "Yo, I need to find something a little bit harder than this. That like I have to like have so much grit that it's like so hard to get through, but I can accomplish." So I was like, you know what? Let's sign up for a marathon.
Oh, right away.
Yeah, no, it was honestly. I think I try to hold back because everyone, that I know was like, don't sign up for, a marathon. You've literally only done one half. Like, come on. I think it was like 7 days later that I like put on Instagram. I'm like, yeah, I guess who's running their first marathon?
Hey, you waited a week. I mean, you
Yeah,
could have done this
I
the day
know.
after. Yeah.
So, so yeah, I announced that pretty soon after, and everyone was like, you're kind of crazy for that. And I was like, yeah, I know. I'm
It
sorry.
is what it is. Yeah, but then you find the running community and you realize that we're all that crazy. So you find you find your group. But cool. So and I know you ran the Philly Marathon. How did you decide on that specific marathon?
So I think like just how running became a big part of my life was during my dad's like diagnosis and the loss of him. So a lot of my childhood, like my dad and I would go to Philadelphia. We would go watch the Phillies games. It was like our place. We loved that place. So when deciding, I was like, I kind of want to run Philly because, that's like me and my dad's city. We love that place. But then upon like further investigation, I went on their website and I saw like charities, and I was like, I wonder if like they have something, a charity to like work with that I'm super passionate about. And
Yeah.
lo and behold, like I think the third charity on there was AFTD, which is the Association of Frontal Temporal Lobe
Wow.
Degeneration. And I was like, this feels like a sign. Like
Yeah, totally.
this feels like fate. Like I should do this.
Yeah.
And I think that was kind of partially what wrote me into like signing up so quick, like the 7-day turnover between running my first half and then signing up and pressing register on Philly Marathon website. So yeah, so that's kind of like my inspiration on like why I kind of signed up, and then also just me being crazy. I was like, you know what? I think I could do
Let's go.
double this. Let's go.
I don't know. I think you kind of proved to yourself, correct me if this wasn't for you, but like I think when you run your first half, like you do prove to yourself that you could like work your way up to something. So you're like, of course, day one when I started running, I didn't think I could run a half marathon, but 16, 10 weeks or whatever, however long you give yourself to train, weeks later, I was able to run it. So I think sometimes we get a little like ambitious about the marathon because we know that we can train for it. We're like, okay, I can't go run 26.2 miles tomorrow, but in the next however many weeks, like I can prove this to myself, you know? Did you feel like that?
Yeah, I think that was how I felt. Like I already had the baseline and the foundation of, okay, I can run 13 miles. So, it is going to be a climb to get to 26.2, but I think I could totally do it. Um,
Totally.
and especially since I think the way that I kind of arranged, I signed up for that one. I didn't have any like races in between my first half and my first marathon that were like, big deal races that I was training for. So I used that time in between my first half and then the beginning of Philly to just have a good base. Like go into
Yeah,
it with like at least I think it was like 20 to 25 miles a week I would do. So to get myself ready and prepared that, that first week you're running a half marathon and it's not so
totally.
scary.
Yeah, you've already got that really solid base. Okay, cool. Well, I know training obviously it's an experience. The marathon is the training. You're going through a lot when you're training for your first marathon. What were some of the high points? What were some of the low points? Like what were those highlight moments for you when you were working through training? No,
Trained
you're
for my
good.
first half of my marathon training, and the middle point is like a half marathon that you run. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll set a PR today. Let's see how it goes. And I had at the time gotten into like fueling way more frequently. Did it based on like mileage. Like every 3 miles, I'd take a gel. So I was already kind of getting into like the rhythm of like how gels felt on my stomach. So I started that race. I felt amazing. I was like cruising. I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is going to be like my day. This is great." I think the first mile is about like a hill. Like first couple miles is like a bridge that you go over twice. So it was after that and then when I got back onto like this main course part of the race, I was like, "Oh no, I don't feel so great. Like this is not good." And it
Mm,
it was like one of the hottest days in September too. So I was expecting, September. I'm like, "Oh, it's not going to be like a summer half marathon." It was. So, yeah, so I did that and I was like, I got, onto the main course and I felt so gross and so like nauseous.
mm,
There was people handing out like cold towels and water bottles. I was taking it all and I was like, oh my God, I hope this helps. And
yeah.
then I was still like fueling because I'm like, okay, that is like the biggest thing. I'm like, I'm not gonna hit a PR today. That's okay. I don't really care about that. I'm in the middle of marathon training, so like that's what comes first. Um, but I got to get through this race, and that was probably the most mentally like toughest races that I've ever gone through because it was like right around mile 6 or 7, my legs just locked up, and I was just like, oh.
Oh.
So it
And
was
you
like
think it was like sorry, do you think it was like under fueling or like just fueling like practicing fueling? That was the challenge on that one.
I think it was kind of I think I was dehydrated. That was
Oh, yeah, the heat.
what got me. I think that was what had gotten me to be, feeling like that. I didn't drink enough water the night before. I didn't get good sleep.
Mm,
It was just like a good mix of like all the things that you should be doing and then also I believe the day before I did walk around Philly like a lot of miles.
mm,
Those are things in like, the future that you realize, okay, I should not be doing that the night before
right.
a half marathon. So yeah, that was kind of a tough battle of that race. Um, I think it was around mile 10. We did like the turnaround to the last 5K, and we were faced with like the worst headwinds of our lives. I was like, oh no, this is not good. And it was just me and my mind. And honestly, like those are the moments that are most clarifying in running is like the moments where it's not even like you're almost like in this like alternate like space. It's just you and your mind and you're just running, but you're not even worried about running anymore. It's like you're just battling yourself and you're like, okay, let's go like one more half mile. okay, one more quarter mile. Okay, we're like a mile away. Let's go. And I remember I crossed the finish line and immediately got sick. And I was like, this
Mm.
is so bad. This is not good. So that was my first time dealing with nausea and sickness during a run, like a race or any type of run. I've never had that happen. So that was a huge, honestly, I was like, yeah, that really stinks that, the race didn't pan out to be the perfect ideal conditions and stuff. But it also was like a good moment to realize, sometimes we don't have the ideal conditions and we have to deal with the things that, happen or thrown our way. So that kind of put into perspective that, like, okay, running a marathon, nothing is going to go perfectly, but at least the one thing that I have control of is like seeing what fuel works for my body and seeing what like really settles well. So I kind of did some like changes. I think part of it was I took a caffeine gel in the middle of that race and that was just too much for my body at the time.
Mm.
And I also incorporated salt tablets in for like the back half of my marathon training and also my marathon. So that was kind of, honestly, I'm glad that that moment happened, because without that moment happening, I think that Philly would have looked a lot differently, to be honest.
Totally. Yeah, we all need the if it's good that it happened in a race almost, because then you get the actual experience. You get the pressure, the adrenaline, the like race atmosphere, but I also think it's also just as helpful to have those like training runs through training too, where you are, for lack of a better word, like humbled a little bit with running, where you're like, okay, I am not bulletproof. I need to take some of this stuff more seriously or learn about it, because sometimes some of that stuff pops up on us and we didn't even like know that it was a thing, like salt tablets. That's something a lot of people discover from being salt deficient for the first time, being like, wow, this sucks. So yeah, I think it's really important to have those runs in training for sure. So had that half marathon experience, and was that your last half marathon before Philly? That was the
No,
last
that was
race?
my second to last. And then I kind of did one of those situations that I did for like my half marathon where like a week later I was like, you know what, I'm going to do another race. But that one was kind of intended. I signed up for my third half marathon with the intention that it was going to be part of like one of my like peak week long run weekends. So
Sure.
a lot of people, I had noticed even from the race that I did, my second half marathon, a lot of people that I know were training for Chicago and they were using that almost as like at least 13 miles of their 20-mile long run. And they did like 7 miles before, or they did like a three and a half, and then a half marathon in between. So I was like, you know what? That's kind of a smart idea to like at least make one of my peak weeks fun, because you probably also know from your own experience, sometimes
Yeah.
doing a 20-mile long run is just, it takes you out. You're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to have that race environment, especially, when that kind of training gets super tough or it ramps up, it gets more intense. So I signed up for my third half marathon for one of my peak weeks in October, and I really liked it. I think it was AC half marathon. So it's like a local one to me. And
Yeah.
I did like a double challenge. I did like the 10K the first day, and then I did the half marathon the second day. And I really liked that because
Nice.
I kind of just party paced it. I was like, okay, let's see what feels good for me, like marathon pace. And if I want to like pick it up a little bit towards the end, like totally, like, whatever I feel comfortable with. And I loved that experience. I felt like fueling for that worked so much better, so much more cohesively, and I felt way more prepared for what race day feels like, the nervousness of that on my stomach, and then like, stomaching a gel and like which ones work for me. And then also I incorporated salt tablets during then too. So that I realized then, I was like, okay, it's starting to click now, like what really works with my
Yeah.
body. And then also kind of incorporating that race day environment to it.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's super important. So then you were feeling like you had like a race under your belt where things went well, and I'm sure that that helped a lot with confidence. Let's fast forward a little bit to getting closer to marathon day. How were you feeling, like let's say like the night before your marathon? Like what was going through your head the night before?
I would say, like many other runners that I've met, I was like, why did I do this? Like I obviously I was confident. I had all the training, to back it up. because
Yeah.
training is the 90%, honestly 95% of the running the marathon. The marathon is just the celebration of it all. So I already had that under my belt. I think the nervousness of the whole, oh my gosh, I'm running 26.2 miles, kind of clicked the night before, and I was laying in my bed wide-eyed, and I was like, was this
What am
a
I
good
doing?
decision
Yeah.
or no? And it was funny because like my mom and my stepdad, they flew up to Philly. They're from Louisiana, so they flew up to Philly to see me run my marathon, which was like so special to me and so nice. But they even saw it. They're like, you just need to go to sleep. And I was like, but you don't understand. I'm so nervous. So yeah, I would say that. But then I was also like, it was kind of like a in between of like, I'm so nervous and I've got this. Like I've trained all this time. So,
Yeah.
it's kind of like that.
Yeah, just like giving it up. There's nothing else we can do at this point. Like I have done everything I can. Cool.
Definitely.
And then morning of, I know when we were talking before, you said that you met a couple of people the morning of your marathon that you felt like really inspired you or changed you. What was that experience like?
So the morning of, I was super worried that I wasn't going to like be able to like, I was worried because everyone says show up 90 minutes early. So I showed up
Yeah.
like 2-3 hours before, which was probably
Wow.
stupid.
Yeah.
I got there around like 5 a.m. So I had like first dibs on all the porta potties, which at the time
You're
were
smart.
clean, beautiful. I stocked up on some toilet paper, which honestly,
Nice.
big thing, big piece of advice for anyone that wants to run a marathon, especially a big one like Philly or any of the majors, or honestly, any of the big major city ones. Bring tissues or Kleenex because, there might be a chance that you do have to go to the bathroom. And usually by the time you get to the bathrooms, they're either really disgusting or there's no toilet paper or both.
That's a great point. Yeah, great tip.
So I was worried about that because I was like, okay, I have to probably pee at least 3 times. So I did that, whatnot. And then they were starting to like line us up around like 45 minutes before 7 a.m. start time. So I kind of hopped in my corral and there was two girls that like came up right next to me on either side. And so we got to talking. We all like kind of noticed we're like around the same age. And I was like, so where are you guys from? And one of them was from New York. Another one was from, I believe, DC. And we just got to talking of like what brought us here and like, why Philly? So the one girl, she said that this was her second marathon. And I believe she had done Philly before. And she's like, I'm telling you right now, this is going to be one of the best experiences of your life. And I was like, are you sure about that? And she's like, I promise you. And then there was another girl who she was kind of in the same boat as me. It was her first marathon. She had a different story from mine. She had been running like half marathons for the last like 4 or 5 years. But I think she was training for a marathon maybe like a year prior and had gotten hurt. So she had to like defer back out of the first marathon. And this was like her
Yeah.
redemption of, I can run a marathon. Like I've trained for this and stuff. No injury or no, past experiences are gonna, dull this experience. Like I've got this. So that was really like uplifting to like, see her come back from a situation like that where, injury strikes and stuff. So that was awesome. And I think I ended up seeing one, maybe both of them actually on the course, like in the latter miles. And I remember like seeing them and we made eye contact and smiled and we're like, oh my gosh, like you've got this. Like
I love
only
that.
5 more miles to go or only like, so that was a really cool experience to talk to people and, especially hearing different journeys and different experiences.
That's cool. I love that. So then we get to the start line. We're feeling all the excitement, the nerves, all the things that come with the start line. Maybe break down like the first half. How was the first half marathon of the Philly Marathon for you?
It was epic. I have never felt like runner's high like that in my life. I don't know if anyone else does this, but I'm like a big music person. So I have like my playlist for Philly was like about 5 hours long. But I remember the first song that came on my playlist was, I think, Like a Prayer by Madonna. And I was just
Love
like, that
it.
is such a good, like, out the gate song to, like, run the first mile to. So I would say like some really high points were like the first 2 miles, the crowds were like electric. And then I would say the third mile ish, it was like a little bit more quiet. It was by like the water, by like the river. And then once we got back into the city, around like 5, 6, and 7, that was when like the crowds were coming back again. That's when I saw like my family for the first time on the course. They were at mile 7. It was right by like our hotel that we stayed at. So it was like so perfect for them. They're like, oh my gosh. Took videos. I hugged them. I stopped and talked to them for a second and then went on my way. And then I think it was like 12 or 13 was when I think it was one of the parks. I forget. But that was when I was starting to be like, oh my gosh, it's starting to get real. Like this, I'm running a marathon. I'm not running a half marathon now. Like there's another half to this. Like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh. So like that, those emotions kind of switch on and off between like
Sure.
the back half of that 13. I was like, oh, this is real. Like this isn't just, 13 miles. This is 26.
Yeah, we're doing this. We're doing this. Yeah, for sure. Cool. So the first half was pretty good. And it sounds like Philly had some great crowd support. So that's always helpful, obviously. And then wait, let's break down maybe I know the last 6 are kind of in their own group. Or maybe was there a point when you hit the wall for the Philly Marathon? Like did you have a specific mileage?
I'd say I was starting to feel like obviously like that feeling of, oh my gosh, this isn't just a half. Like that was kind of like from 13 to 15, but I was still going and I was like, okay, this is kind of like a long run. I'm like my 20-mile long run. But I think it was around 18 that I hit the wall specifically. I remember it.
Yeah. What was that feeling like? Like what did it feel like? And then what were you kind of saying to yourself to push yourself beyond, the wall?
So I would say I was starting to feel like my legs were cramping up. My legs felt like they were wanting to stop. I was starting to feel like, I don't know, my feet were starting to hurt. And then it was also too, the way that the course is on Philly is you do a few laps through Fairmount and like the observatory park as like the middle, like part of the race. And then from like, I believe 15 to 20, it's just a straight incline up Kelly Drive. So it's not like a big hill. It's more just gradually getting, more inclined as you go. So I think it was like halfway through that, I was just like, oh my God, I have 2 more miles and it's like I'm climbing up like a hill and it's like a never ending hill. I'm like, gosh, why did I think this was smart?
Yeah, you definitely have those moments where you're second guessing yourself towards the end. You're like, oh my God, what am I doing here? But then you get closer to the finish line. You see the finish line maybe in the distance. And I know you had this whole emotional experience kind of wrapped up in this too with your dad and running in Philly where you had like all these experiences growing up. So like what was going through your head when you saw the finish line and you were like, oh my God, I am about to finish this thing?
Was like, I've got to do this. I saw the crowds, I would say, because I saw from 18 to 23, my best friend was out there cheering me on. That's what honestly got me out of the pain cave. I was like so deep at like 18, and then I saw her pass by and we made direct eye contact. She didn't even know I was going by. So that's what got me through that. But that last 5K, I saw her, and then my mom had texted me and she was like, I'm at mile 26. We're waiting for you. We're waiting for you. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I think it was like that anticipation of like, I was running to my mom and my stepdad. But then it was like the culmination of that. And then there were some good songs that were coming up on my playlist. And then I was also thinking, I was going back to my why, because those miles were so hard. Like those last, 23 to 26 is just like mental toughness, like mental battle. So it was like, going back to my why, like I'm doing this for my dad. I'm doing this because, I really care about him a lot and he means the world to me and I love him. And I know if he was here today, he would be at the very end, 26.1, being like, go the extra 0.1. You got this. You got this. And I know that would have been, he would have been like on the floor, like that would have made his whole entire year, like me running a marathon. He's the type of guy that he would post on like Facebook and like always be like, oh my gosh, I'm so proud of my daughter. He was like
I
number one
love
hype
it.
man. So I know he would be up there with like a really embarrassing sign of me and saying, "You've got this," with like a fat head or like, of me. So that was what
Yeah.
like I guess I was picturing like the what if he was there type thing, and like I was thinking, he is here. Like he's here in my heart. So I'm running this for him and, running this to honor him and his life. So that's kind of like what propelled me to the finish line. And I remember crossing the finish line, I was like, just like a load of tears. I was sobbing. I was like, I can't believe I did this. Like, this is
Yeah.
insane. And then, kind of in a funnier aspect, I crossed the finish line, was crying. But then I was like, I looked over to the person next to me and I was like, man, I kind of want to do that again. And the person was like,
Yeah, when's the next
"You're
one?
actually crazy. What?" So, yeah, that was pretty funny.
That's so funny. Yeah, you're like, let's run this back. Let's go.
Yeah, I was like, let's run this back because this was like the best experience of my life. And they were like, what?
I love it. Oh, I love it. Yeah, you're just ready for the next move. And I know you've got, well, first of all, before I even get there, that's amazing. I got chills like when you were talking about your dad and getting to the finish line and like doing it all for him. So I'm like, it's so awesome that you got to have that experience for your first marathon and that everything went so according to plans. Cause, I think sometimes that first marathon falls into two categories. It's either life changing and I want to run another one, or it can kind of not be your favorite experience and I want to run another one to make up for it. And I'm glad you were in the category of this was amazing. And because it was so amazing, I want to do this again. I think that's amazing. So cool. And then I know that you've got some pretty big goals coming up. But before we talk about some of those, what I always like to ask for advice on this show. There's some newer runners that listen to the show, some first time marathoners that are actually training for their first marathon. So if you could offer some advice to somebody who's in the middle of training for their first marathon or maybe thinking about running their first marathon, what's some advice you might give them?
So I would definitely say big things, at least in mine, is fueling, finding what works for you. Everyone's different. So at least for me, the fuel that I use the Science and Sports gels. Those ones work really good with my stomach. So I use those. I use salt sticks, but like everyone's different. Like, what works for me may not work for you. So trial and error is huge. Like, I think that is what will navigate you to what works for you. And I'd say the same thing for shoes. I know at least I ran a lot of my training miles in the Glycerins by Brooks. So that was like my staple running shoe. And that was actually what I ended up running my marathon in. So that I also would say rehearsing your marathon. By that, I mean your last 20-mile long run, do everything that you would be doing for your marathon. So all the
Totally.
fuel, like even if it's down to the flavor of the fuel, like that, I
Yeah.
mean, that could be big. So that
Even the outfit. Like
wearing the
wear what you
outfit,
plan to wear. Yeah.
that's exactly what I did. I wore the outfit. I planned, brought all the fuel. I wore my handheld water bottle that I was going to be bringing to Philly. So doing that really mentally prepares you, especially for once you get to the marathon where, energy's high, you've got the race day jitters, and you're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? But thinking back, okay, you've done 20 miles in the same exact outfit and the same exact fuel. You've got this.
Yeah.
So
That's
I'd
great.
say that. And then also, too, like, don't get so hard on yourself. Like, not everything's going to be perfect. I mean, even in my own experience, I had like the allergic reaction. I had like my half marathon that was not the best experience. But like, using those as learning experiences and lessons for like what to do and what not to do, but also knowing that life happens. Like if you miss a run, it's not the end of the world. If you miss a long run, it's it's probably not even going to matter in like the long run of your marathon at all. I
Right.
promise you.
No, that's great. I love that. Yeah. I've brought this up on the show before, but I always think about that graphic of like, here's all the runs that I have to train. Here's the same graphic with a few runs that like I didn't get to. And it's almost the exact same graphic. So really don't sweat the small stuff. I think that's a great one. Well, cool. And then you've got some fun stuff coming up. You want to talk about a little bit of what you're doing for this year, what you're training for, what some of your goals are?
Yeah, so this year is a little bit different than last year. I like had a lot of momentum going up to the marathon, and a lot of people were like super shocked when I was like, "Hey, so I'm not running a marathon this year." And they're like, "Wait, what?" And I'm like, "Yeah," which I think also another piece of advice, like when you run a marathon, don't feel pressure to run another one right like
Yeah.
back to back or even like the year after. Give yourself time to like process that feeling and all of like that experience and go back to the marathon when you feel comfortable to do it.
Yeah.
But back to my schedule of like what I'm doing. I am running the Philly Love Run in end of March. I've been off my training. I just started like a really intense nursing school program. So I have
Yeah.
been like
That's a lot.
really running as much. I've been like, again, that's like the big thing, molding running to what your life needs at the time. And that's kind of like what I'm doing. It's not about like fitting your life around running. It's about fitting running around your life. So that's something that I'm really looking forward to. I'm also doing a trail relay with 7 other different women in I think the end of April. We're going down to I believe Richmond, Virginia. So that's really exciting. And then I have, which is super far in advance, but I'm running my first 50K in January 2026. So I'm really excited. And there's actually a few people who have convinced me and also are running it too that are from Instagram that I'm really excited to like run that race with them. So
That's awesome. So we've
yeah.
got lots of stuff coming up this year. And yeah, you post a lot of your journey on social media. Obviously, that's how we connected, and I think a lot of people connect with you on there as well. So if anybody from here wants to find you and follow along with that journey, where can they find you?
So you can find me on Instagram. I am run.with.ash on Instagram. And then I think my TikTok is Runner Girl Ashley. I'm kind of new on there. I don't really post as much, and that's more of like kind of like my life, like how my life and running kind of intertwine. So I don't really post as much running content on there. It's kind of just like a mix of both like what's going on in my life, running, anything that I find funny, to be honest. So yeah.
Well, I'll link both of them in the show notes, obviously, so people can follow along with you easily there. But just thank you again for walking through your story. This was super, super insightful to kind of break down the stuff that we don't always see on social media. I love that you've been able to kind of redefine this relationship with running, take what the things that you liked about movement from being a softball player and turn it into this whole thing. So yeah, just thank you for coming on and telling your story today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning into another episode. If you're enjoying My First Marathon, it would mean the world to me if you could rate and review the show. As a reminder, check out myfirstmarathonpodcast.com for free resources, and if you can't get enough MFM for $5 a month, you can also get access to extended episodes, bonus content, and a Q&A corner featuring some of our most popular guests. Check out the exclusives tab on the website for more information. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.